Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. We will begin in the next 2 to 3 minutes. We're just waiting for a few more people to join us. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm Charmaine Khade, and on behalf of the Brainalytics team and our title partner, Exotel, I welcome you all on this roundtable, which is on digital transformation of customer experience in banks. Before we start the roundtable, there are a few guidelines I would like to highlight and make everyone aware of. Requesting all the attendees to be on mute when the speakers are taking their sessions. There would be a Q&A after each session where the attendees can ask questions, if any, to the speakers. The guidelines are: raise your hands, unmute yourself, turn on your video, introduce yourself, and ask your question. To tell you a little bit about our partner, Exotel. Exotel is one of Asia's largest cloud telephony companies, working with 4,500 plus businesses, including top enterprises and startups. They solve communication problems for various industries, be it automobile, e-commerce, cab aggregators, BFSI, or Fintech. Exotel is a secure and reliable business phone system on the cloud. Simple to set up, no additional infrastructure or equipment required. It enables sales and supports teams irrespective of where they work from. Now, I would like to invite Shubha Sundaram, ABM lead, Exotel, who will share her insights on adoption of cloud communication for digital transformation in banks. Over to you, Shubha.
Thanks, Charmaine. So thanks for everyone taking out your time and joining today's discussion. So just give me a few minutes. I just share my screen, and then we'll start with the discussion and the presentation. Is my screen visible?
Yes. Yes, Shubha.
Yes, Shubha.
I'm audible, right?
Yes, you are.
Yeah. So yeah, I would like to introduce myself before I just take ahead with today's discussion. I'm Shubha. I take care of account-based marketing at Exotel. My roles, especially involves working with a lot of enterprises to streamline their customer communication, especially over calls and SMS. I have worked across a lot of banks, NBFC, especially to solve their communicational challenges to bring both operational and financial benefits. So the agenda for today's discussion is initially we'll talk about the introduction and growth of techs in BFSI. Second, we will concentrate on what are the key communication challenges that is faced in today's bank and how cloud communication can solve those challenges. And the final part will be how Exotel is helping to transform the banks to streamline their customer communication. So this following image, it talks about how the technology has penetrated to the Indian BFSI sector. There are right now more than 78 private companies and initiatives that is empowering the digital India. So these are some of the channels. This is the combination of both traditional challenges and also recent digital banking channels, with how bank are communicating with the customers. So the traditional channels like bank branches, call centers, ATM, and the recent channels like digital channels like mobile banking, internet, digital banking, phone banking. So these are some according to Deloitte, these are some of the channels that is being used by the banks for different transactions. However, the COVID-19 caused an unprecedented catalyst for digital banking across the country. I mean, with a lot of branches were temporarily shut down and most of the physical interactions were minimized. Retail bank customers, they had no choice but to embrace the self-service channels like never before. Almost every bank, like large bank, small bank, they saw a huge spike in digital banking usage. The pandemic also pushed a lot of customers to use mobile banking for the first time, especially in the older cohorts. According to a recent survey that was done by Deloitte, findings indicate that the consumer preferences for digital banking have becoming very much context dependent. They are using a lot of digital channels for routine transaction, but for services that are very complex and involved, many of the customers are still preferring in-person interactions, that is through phone calls or through branches. Since pandemic experiences, many customers are looking for instant gratification, increased convenience, and also flexibility, but also they are looking for more tailored, personalized services. That said, irrespective of any banking channel they are using, the branch, phone, or mobile app, one common factor that seems to remain so important is the human touch. While digital banking has always symbolized convenience, it has traditionally lacked the human touch and the personal connection. As a result, many believe the engendering trust in digital context is generally more challenging. The pandemic, however, provided banks with an opportunity to blend the human touch in the digital interaction with the customer. One such example is for example, in nowadays, when a customer wants to look for a human, to provide a home loan services, they have to actually go through maybe in the internet, he actually comes across a home loan. He has to enter few details, and also he might have to talk with some call center employees to know how to submit the application form. So going forward, it actually because of the pandemic because of the digital interaction, a lot of human touch has been actually have been reduced. So most of the banks in Exotel, they started using video calls, which helping to connect the representatives with the customers. So some of the teams that are benefited by moving to the cloud are sales support, relationship management, collection, and IT operation. So because of pandemic, it has given rise to increase in the usage of both physical and digital channels, especially younger consumer, they are looking for more set of expectations in an interconnected experiences. It may become increasingly normal for the consumers to engage in a multi-channel journey. As I mentioned before, imagine a scenario where the customer is actually looking for an information, especially on a home loan, in a mobile app or a laptop. So you can actually, maybe we can have a chatbot to find out what is the current interest rate. And immediately a customer service executive can make a call to them to discuss what is the process to obtain for a pre-qualification letter. And probably he can collect all the details via co-browsing platform or a video call to submit the application. Now, the transition from one channel to another is very seamless. Every time a consumer, he switches the channel, all the information will be will be taken in a common CRM. This leads to a very connected experience from both the customer and bank. So that's why it is important for the bank's technology system to be tightly integrated to allow for a seamless exchange of data to enable both physical and digital channels so that the customer can migrate from one channel to another with the ease. That is where Exotel single multi-channel customer communication platform plays a very significant role. And all the teams can actually benefit by moving to all these cloud communication platforms. Moving on, let's talk about what are some of the key communication challenges per function. So some of the teams like sales relation team, support team, collection team, IT operations team, because a lot of agents and the customers are involved, there is a lot of gap and some of the common challenges, especially when it comes to the sales and relation team, is because they don't have like a single, because a lot of CRM, a lot of different channels have been used to get a lead into a system, or there is no context of the customer engagement, or a lack of customer information. Suppose a customer is actually looking for an information through a marketing channel, maybe through an app or through a website. All these information are not captured and given to the salesperson, because of which most of the agents, they try to have like a very informal or a very insecure connection with the customer. And especially for a support team, similarly, when a customer is actually, when a lead is actually converted to the customer, because all these information are not being passed to the support agent, there is we are not able to provide, most of the banks are not able to provide a good customer experience because of siloed customer data. And because of pandemic, as many teams started moving to remote, they were not able to gauge calls performance of the agent. And obviously there were a lot of repetitive queries and manual responses have to be given. This actually in turn it reduced the agent's productivity. Moving on to collection team, they actually face one of the biggest challenges in the communication channels across the bank, because they have to do a lot of manual repetitive calling to notify to the customers about their upcoming EMI, because of which because of huge amount volume of calling being gone from a single number, most of these numbers are marked as a spam. And since the collection calls are made by a lot of third party agents, a lot of infrastructure has also been invested. And then because of loss of information, the collection of information of how the customer got a loan, or through which he is actually going to do the payment, which channel he is actually engaging a lot, because of lack of these information, there is here there is no opportunity for personalization of customer engagement. When it comes to IT and operation teams, specifically because there are different communication channel, be it WhatsApp, SMS, calls, and they are using different vendors to be in touch with them. There is a lack of there is this hamper distributed the communication, and there is no unifying all the stack into one single place. And obviously they have to do a huge upfront investment for equipment, and there are a lot of scaling and configure issues. And because there is a huge loss of revenue because of a poor two-factor authentication delivery. And obviously one of the most important thing is legal liabilities because of infringement of customer information. Because here a lot of informations have been shared across a lot of third-party vendors. Maybe there might be infringement of customer information, such as their contact details, their phone number, or else. So how Exotel, they primarily solve all these challenges through different products. Like, some of the solutions here, which I would like to discuss is, some of the solutions that can actually enhance the sales and support team are, they actually, you can start focusing on the high potential deal. Because most of the field sales or the relationship management team, the salespeople actually make calls on their personal mobile phone numbers. Instead of which there is a lack of recording of calls and you're not able to review a lot of call data. Obviously, we are not able to, the bank are not able to focus what are the high potential deals. So using cloud communication system, you can actually, using our APIs, you can integrate with your CRM, and you can record all your field level salespeople call, your relationship manager call, through which you will be able to focus on high potential deals. Obviously, better agent productivity. So how can we improve the agent productivity? Mostly, a lot of manual calls has been made by the branch officers or your relationship manager. Instead of which we can bulk automate, automate bulk calling. And once the customer actually picks it up, you can intelligently route the calls to the target reps on the base of the areas of expertise. So some of the products, which actually helps to solve these common challenges are auto dialer. We can actually do it for both calls and SMS. Obviously, the smart voice response IVR. You'll be able to track agent level insights, and obviously all the call recordings and all call analytics can be actually captured. Second thing, obviously to have a better lead to deal conversion. That is where the call insights play a very significant role. Because you're able to capture a lot of call insights, you can segment and personalize the prospect conversation better, which can obviously improve your lead to deal conversations. And obviously web bots can be used to take over the response for repetitive queries, especially for your support team when the customers are trying to get in touch for repetitive L1 queries and all those things. You can automate using voice bot or chat bot to actually respond to those repetitive queries. And as I was mentioning before, create a single source of truth, because your sales team and support team, they might be using a different CX app, and obviously they are using a different CRM or a help desk to capture all those all those customer information. There is a lack of truth. So obviously through a cloud communication system, you can integrate it with your existing CRM or help desk. It will create a single source of truth which you can implement across your channel partners, your different teams, like your distributed sales team, your inbound team, your contact center team, which can help to build a comprehensive customer profile, which can obviously help your support team in a later part. Whenever for example, when you have I'm Shubha, I'm just trying to get in touch with some bank employees to collect some details, I have a support level query call. Obviously, when your support agent, when they have a profile pop up, giving all the details about Shubha, when she became a customer, which channel, she actually took the home loan, or how she opened an account. When they have all the informations, obviously the agent is able to provide a better CX experience. So some of the product capabilities that can actually enhance through the cloud communications are having obviously automated campaign, rich API integration that can be integrated with any of your CRM, help desk, or ERP which you're using. Obviously chatbots, voice bot, and then another one major important thing is actually dashboard and reporting, where you will be able to create a lot of dashboards, and you will be able to have better reports to know about your performance of your different agents, different teams. Even though if they are working remotely or they are working from office, you'll be able to capture all these information. Moving on, especially to I'm just actually taking some time to talk about relationship management teams. We have actually come across a lot of banks facing a lot of issues, especially from their relationship manager team, where when the RM leave the system, they are not able to retain a lot of their HNI clients. So because because RM are using their personal phone numbers to get in touch with them, or they are actually poaching their customers when they are actually moving to another bank. So how you can you can actually retain your customers by actually providing a single virtual number, through which it will be a single number for any customer conversation we are trying to have with you. And on the basis of which RM, the virtual number, you can route the calls to the specific RM. So what is the biggest advantage is obviously the communication for business continuity. Even if the RM leaves the system, or he's not available, still you'll be able to route the call to the RM of that particular region. And obviously when you're because obviously they are very HNI clients, you need to maybe have a rich call insight, and can populate your CRM about the information about the clients. So even if there is a new RM, obviously they will have all the information about the customer when the customer is actually trying to get in touch with them. You can actually make a profile pop up in their CRM, so that even if it is going to be a new RM, they will obviously have a lot of information about the customer, so that the customer they need not share the repetitive information again and again. If they are already their customer, they can start directly talking about their problem, instead of maybe talking about what are they doing, what are their investment, or what they are looking for. You can actually provide a very personalized experience for your customer. So obviously some of the product capabilities are you can actually rent a lot of virtual pool numbers. You can actually have with the Truecaller partnership, you can whitelist all the numbers for different region, virtual numbers for different RM. Obviously dynamic caller ID here plays a very significant role, because obviously you'll be having your relationship managers across different states. So when you get a dynamic caller ID, if the customer is actually calling from Bangalore, or if a customer is actually calling from Mumbai, maybe when you get the information, and probably when the RM is trying to reach to them, they can probably give a call from a Maharashtra number or a Karnataka number, with the Truecaller partnership, probably branding, for example, this bank RM is trying to get in touch with you. If you provide those information, it can actually enhance the better CX experience. And obviously you can trigger automated feedback calls and SMS to collect the feedback. So, and obviously as I mentioned, all the call analytics, dashboard, and API reporting you'll be able to capture. And yeah, so apart from that, using cloud system obviously is going to improve your relationship manager performance, because you are taking all the call insights and using a lot of sentiment analysis, or the speech to text context. You can actually analyze which is the winning pitch of some of your top performers, and you can share it across to your team. Like they might be having certain keywords, and they might be having they are actually becoming a top performer because of the certain keywords which they are using. You can use a sentimental analysis, or speech to text contacts, or different bots to capture all these information, and you can share it across to your rest of the team members. This can obviously improve your NPS or CSAT score. And another thing is all these branch officer, or RMs, they'll be having a lot of routine tasks, probably for a cross sell campaign, or if they are trying to cross sell some to their existing customers. They can obviously schedule an automated calls, with a personalized automated call for or drop an SMS, or even WhatsApp can be actually triggered from especially from an RM's virtual number. So that all these offloading of routine tasks from the RM can be avoided. So some of the product capabilities here are obviously sentimental analysis, voice bot IVR, automated calls, SMS campaign, and all the call analytics. Moving on to the collection team, as I had mentioned earlier, collection team, they face a huge amount of challenge, especially when it comes to the customer communication part. Here, obviously, because of a very higher depth recovery, a lot of number rotation, if it can be implemented, this will obviously increase their pickup rate. or else like, and if a person is actually not picking up the call and they are putting your number in spam, obviously when you're going to rotate the number, the pickup rate will increase and your number will also not go to spam. And you can also use chatbots to assist the customer to complete the payment. The second thing is actually non-intrusive communication. So when you're able to track all the data, to gauge what is the best response time slot, obviously you can actually get the information when you share the payment link to the customers, which channel they are using actually to do the payment. But if all these information are created, all the data have been collected, obviously cloud communications can help you to plan a very non-intrusive communication, especially to have like a periodic call or an SMS reminder or a WhatsApp reminder. After the call, after the communication, probably another follow-up can be made by sending a custom payment link to improve the in-the-moment remittances. Obviously here dynamic caller ID, you'll be VN renting and purchasing. These are some of the product capabilities that can actually help your collection team. Just a second. Hey, just a second. I'm not able to. Can you just let me know which screen is there?
Shubha, we are at the
Sorry.
cloud communication for collection teams.
Just give me a minute. I'm not able to move my presentation. Just give me a minute.
No problem.
I'm just sharing my screen again.
Yeah.
Is my screen visible now?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Thanks, Chaman. Thanks, Ekta. So, moving on, what are some of the cloud communication solutions that can add value to the IT team? Obviously, from the beginning of the presentation, I was talking about a single source of truth. One of the biggest advantage of using a cloud, a full stack customer engagement cloud communication platform is you can have different APIs that can be integrated with your CRM, and you'll be able to get a 360-degree customer engagement stack for your customer facing teams, be it your sales team, your field sales team, your RM team. They'll be having a single source of CRM and a common platform for the engagement with the customer. And obviously it'll be a virtual asset-less communication framework, because whenever there is whenever there is a new requirement, obviously that will need a huge amount of investment in the physical infrastructure, and it will complicate the go live efforts by the IT, because we have had conversation with a lot of IT team. They might need to do some sort of a customization configuration, which will actually take a lot of time so that they go live. But using a cloud communication, obviously it is like a C+ platform. It is actually going to be an easy effort for the IT team, so that the go live can happen very easily, and obviously it is all going to be a virtual asset-less communication framework. Some of the product capabilities, as I mentioned, C+ platform, obviously the contact center management, and the REST APIs. So these are some of the examples of how Exotel is helping some of the top BFSI companies in India to streamline the customer communication part. So we are working actually with a lot of different banks, but I've mentioned only customers who are using us for a very long time. Especially Bajaj Finserv, they are using our platform for more than 5-6 years now. So what Bajaj Finserv is using us for, they have actually integrated click-to-call integration into their website. So when the customer actually wants to get information, this click-to-call information, it will actually pop up like in a chatbot. And when they click on it, obviously they are going to get connected with the sales people, which has actually increased their sales conversion for Bajaj Finserv by 18%. And for IDFC First Bank, their loan department, they are using our automated call APIs to actually trigger cross-selling loans automated call. So this will be a personalized bot calling, personalized call, which has actually achieved like 73% reduction in the manual effort to pre-approve loans, especially when they are doing the cross-selling. And ICICI Bank, they've been they were the only pioneer who actually came up with a problem statement, their RMs were leaving the system and they are not able to track and monitor their RM calls, and they wanted a single virtual number to track to connect with across all their RMs. So using our Exotel platform, they were able to achieve 100% monitoring, and they were able to record the calls, they were able to monitor the RM, and even when the RMs were leaving the system, they made sure they were able to retain a lot of their HNI customers. Yeah, this is how most of the BFSI segment they are using Exotel for. And that brings to the conclusion for today's presentation. So the floor is open for questions.
Yes, if anybody has any questions for Shubha, I can see Makran's hand is raised. Makran, if you can unmute yourself and put your question to Shubha, would be great.
Hey, hi Shubha. Thanks for the detailed. Am I audible first?
Yeah.
Yeah, hi. Thanks for the detailed presentation, Shubha, that you have given. I had a question on the relationship management part. Is this particular application is over and above the dialer, or it will act as a dialer also?
So it can act as a dialer. So how most of our existing bank are using our system is they might be using actually a CRM in which we have actually have the did an integration for click to call functionality. So when the RM is trying to make a call, obviously they will click on it, a call will trigger, and they will get in touch with the customer. So that is also happening. And if you have a requirement that you want to use a dialer, instead of actually using a CRM, you want a dialer, that can also be implemented.
Can we use over and above the dialer? That means we will be having our own dialer, and above that there will be your application work as an additional package, and it will give the functionalities that for the specific RMs.
Yeah, that can also be done. We have different APIs. It can be integrated, and whatever the workflow which you want, however the workflow you want, that can be implemented.
Sure. If anybody can get back to me on this one later on, that will be really great.
Sure, Makrand. After the week, probably I'll get in touch with you.
Okay, thank you, Shubha. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks.
Any more questions for Shubha? Okay, in case there are any questions that come up later, you all can type it in the chat box, and then probably we can take it at the end of the session. Moving forward, now we will have a very interesting panel discussion, which is on reimagining customer experience using cloud communication. I'm happy to introduce our speakers today. We have Umang Gupta. He's AVP Product, Fintech and Neo Banking with Kotak Mahindra Bank. We have Prasanna Lohar. He's VP Technology with DCB Bank. Anish Chaudhary. He is Head Retail Digital Business with Yes Bank. Sumit Singh. He is Vice President with Paytm Payments Bank. Just wanted to add that the views expressed on this discussion are personal in nature and should not construe any official or indirect position of the bank our speakers represent. I would now like to invite our moderator, Shubha, to take over.
Thanks, Chaman. So thanks for the introduction. As Chaman mentioned, the topic for today's discussion is reimagining the CX using cloud communication platform. So before we begin, obviously we have a strong panel along with this. Let's do a quick round of introduction before starting today's discussion. So please join me in welcoming Prasanna Lohar, VP Technology, DCB Bank. I think so. He has not actually joined. Moving on, Anish Chaudhary, Head of Retail Digital Business, Yes Bank. Hi, Anish.
Hi everyone.
And then Sumit Singh, VP of Paytm Payments Bank. Hi,
Hi,
Sumit.
Shubha.
Hi.
Hi, Shubha. Hi, everyone.
Yeah. Umang Gupta, AVP Product, Fintech and Neo Banking, Kotak Mahindra Bank. Hi, Umang.
Hi, everyone.
Hi. So looking forward to have a insightful discussion with all of you. So obviously, during the initial part of today's discussion, we covered a little bit on the trends on the communication side of the banking sector. So let's deep dive into today's discussion. So the first part of today's discussion will actually talk about the communication strategy, how each bank has adopted during, especially during the pandemic. So before pandemic, obviously, our country always had a traditional way of selling financial products, where where we'll be having a face-to-face interaction. So obviously, for opening a new bank account, you have to see some sort of an agent, or you have to visit the branch, or even for applying loans. But with remote selling and remote servicing, how did the relationship between the agent or the salesperson or the branch officers and the customers impacted? I mean, how your customer interaction, how were you able to curate your customer communication around that? Anish, if you can, starting with, can you please share your thoughts on that?
Sure. So I think fundamentally, if you look at what's happened in the last 2 years, you have to look at it in 3 different phases, which is corresponding with the 3 waves. I think what we are talking today, with corresponding to the 3rd wave, is very different from what it happened, in April, May 2020, when the entire lockdown happened and it was completely unenvisaged. But if you look at the banking sector being part of the essential services, you would appreciate that most of the banks were operating with some kind of branch staff, etc. So the disruption in economic activity has not been very high. Even if you look at the data, yes, the economy shrunk a bit, and yes, growth has been flat across many sectors. But the moment lockdowns were lifted, the growth came back. Barring the first phase where there was a very stringent economic lockdown, phase 2 and 3, most of them were social lockdowns to an extent, but not so much of economic. So I think the resilience came back. And therefore, fundamentally, if you look at a banking solution, there are 3-4 elements that one has to look at. One is acquisition of customers. The other one is, of course, operations and processing. And the third one is collections, etc., if you're looking at it from an asset point of view. Now, let's look at each of them in 3 different parts. First of all, when it comes to acquisition, I think a lot of evolution has happened. Not that, there was not much happening on digitalization front. I think there's been a tremendous uptick on digitalization itself, I think around 2015 odd, right from, this entire UPI thing coming through, India Stack coming through. And then, of course, of late, we are talking about account aggregators, etc. So there has been an undercurrent of massive digital transformation that's been underway. But what, of course, the pandemic has done, and I think it's almost a cliche now that what the CTOs couldn't achieve, COVID did, right? So effectively, that has resulted into a lot of changes. From an acquisition point of view, I think a lot of things have moved digital. And from a channel perspective, I think one of the key things that I see across the industry is that physical only has moved to a lot of phygital, as well as things have become digital. So even if you look at the feet on street, etc., a lot of enablement was already underway through mobile phones, tablets, etc., which became the primary mode of communication, especially during lockdowns, etc. Even for the role of contact centers, and I think that's where remote calling helped a lot. Since they were on cloud, I could see that the big ones could actually move outside the premises because the employees couldn't come in. So that really helped to keep the business continuity intact to a great extent. Yes, there were lags, etc., but I think the kind of massive, it's almost like a war that we are facing. I think the amount of transition hiccups were much lesser thanks to cloud telephony and various other solutions like voice bots, etc., that came in. I think the chat solutions played a very crucial role as well. So a lot of, if you see compared 2 years back versus now, the library of automated chatbots, etc., has reduced the kind of pressure that you have on the back end. I think the most intriguing part has been collections, as well as in terms of some of the emergency ECLGS and various schemes that the government's rolled out to kind of help the MSMEs and individual borrowers. I think that is where there's been a great learning. If you look at even the books of most of the published financial institutions, the impact of COVID has not been that detrimental as was initially worried. When the first break happened, there was a lot of fear that it could wipe out balance sheets or create tremendous impact. And despite tremendous unemployment, despite a lot of MSMEs going bust for some time, I think the credit growth as well as the delinquencies have come down. And a lot of it is to do with the digital mediums and modes that were adopted. Right from very simple things like links for payments being given, automated payment options. I think the number of ways customers can make payments has increased substantially. So I think all of these coming together, it's not just the cloud infrastructure, but also some of the basic things which were automated and made available to people to access from their homes has played a very crucial role in getting all this together.
I mean, I mean, as you told, pandemic accelerated a lot of, people to use a lot of digital channel. So moving on, Sumit, what do you think, about the communication strategies, especially, during the pandemic and all, how has it, changed?
So I must say that, frankly speaking, we were a little foresighted, and we already took care of this aspect of the customer earlier only, because Paytm being a fintech platform. But at certain point of time, we also had to face troubles, and even I feel that each and every organization had to face trouble, because no one knew that such a situation will arise. And but the best part was that organizations immediately evolved, and even the customers also adjusted. But there is a lot that has to be done right now. As Anish was also saying, that there are a lot of platforms that have changed. The ways of selling has changed. Even the way of communication has already changed. Still, I also believe that it's not only the traditional organizations that face trouble, but even all the digital organizations also, fintech organizations also face a lot of trouble, in this, because communication is not easy. So one of the biggest examples which I should give about the the evolution will be probably the video KYC. The KYC that used to happen face to face has now started happening through video KYC, and most of the banks have started doing that. So this is one of the biggest thing that has happened. The change that has happened. Even RBI has to move towards understanding that this is required. This is much required. So this is one of the most important things that has happened. We need to also understand that the customer is agile and is very connected. So the usage of communication has to be really strong to ensure that the customer sticks to the organization. So this is one of the most important things that has to be taken care. So this is my point of view for this.
Thanks, Sumit. So yeah, as you mentioned, as Anish mentioned and you mentioned, digital transformation was always there. So how do you think, COVID has accelerated the digital transformation process? So how difficult was it to serve the customer, or to communicate with them? Because people have started they were looking for instant solutions. So Prasanna, I think so you've joined. Hi, Prasanna.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody.
So can you actually just give your views on that?
Can you repeat the question, Shubha?
Yeah. No, actually, digital transformation was always there. How do you think, COVID has accelerated the digital transformation process, or how difficult was it for you to serve the customer, or to have a communication? Yeah.
So I think some of our friends already said, right? I think innovation index was at peak during the COVID time. If you look at all organizations, we have seen organizations within organization teams are collaborating on the highest level, right? It was never like IT versus business, which typically usually happen before pandemic. I think that has really helped to serve the customers ultimately, and customers are also changed during this pandemic time, right? So if you look at the customer who used to visit cinema halls or Pizza Huts, right, restaurants, everything is at home. That's the traction. I think automatically this cross-industry innovation is a demand, right, from banks, insurance companies. So I think one of our friends, Umang, has mentioned about video KYC, right? So typically, I think that's a traction. If you look at IT end, when it was announced way back in March 2020 pandemic, I think today we feel it is a normal, right? So I think this moment after I think almost 18 almost 18-20 months, if we talk about same situation, I think we already surpassed that situation, right? It was an era. This is what, for me, at least in 2020, March, April was an era, right? So customer has changed. We also have changed. That's the magic behind how we have served the customer. And the way we used to do before pandemic, and now it is completely different. I think if you look at the project deliveries at a bank, right, it was typically into 40, 50. But I think during pandemic, we have done at most 6 to 7 times. What does it mean? Automation index also changed, like onboarding of customer. It was only branches or some of those straight through account opening processes. So here we had implemented some of those for our fixed deposit, which is our key business, or for lending per se, we have went ahead with the loan origin processes, then implementing some of those social media kind of activities, right? So wherein we can take those leads and totally put it onto those mobile apps or WhatsApp banking. So I think businesses and IT has worked together in every organization and formulated a framework. These are the deliveries for this month, next month, and engagement with the customer was very high, right? So I think it's a combination of IT, contact center, business, and ultimately security while you're opening the things to the internal customer, right? So from say example, immediately we have to share those laptops, a lot many ports to be opened and so on, right? I think what we had emphasized or done in the back end, right? Creation of those payment platform, ESB platform, API platform, got into the actual action during the pandemic, and we could able to sustain. And what is that now organization driving? What is there here onwards? Now, because our orbit has automatically changed, right? So expectations from customer, business teams have changed. Being at IT side, I need to see now what is the next level, right? So that kind of a thought process is coming up now. Now it's very easy now to at least to have a internal some of those decisions to do. Now there are different challenges. Everybody's reached to that level, right? So same customer talking to the bank AB, how do I really engage considering my services, right? So adoption of AI, big data to understand customer more, creation of more security around those applications which we have built out on cloud, right? So it was a well-versed, like RBI also come up with the digital payment security controls back in 2021, Feb 2018. So that has given another edge, like while we are delivering so many things on digital transformation, how do we keep it safeguarded, right? So I think it's a good time, Subha, in a nutshell. The time will be another zone when we'll have a blockchains, NFTs or 5Gs, wearables, IoTs, where customer is already moving there. Which customer? Millennial customer, who is going to be a matured customer in the next 3 to 4 years. Now it's a different wave altogether. Collaboration with the fintechs is again increasing. You have seen last year we had so many unicorns, right? 45 plus unicorns in India. Maybe this year we'll surpass 150. Organizations have to keep an eye on what internal people are doing, how they are reskilling, which are those processes to be automated, which technology needs to be adopted today and for tomorrow, how regulation and external forces like fintechs will help them, and keep hearing from customer day to day, or some mechanism, right, wherein we can always seek a feedback through voice of customer. And so I think this is what we are doing. By the time we reach next year, I think it will be different ball game altogether. So I think that's the strategy we are looking at. Yeah.
Thanks, Prasanna. Umang, I think so you can give your view here. Like, what was your transformation story during the pandemic?
I'd like to take the points forward from what Prasanna was saying. So actually, this entire digital transformation acceleration was, it's not an acceleration, it was like a jump, which we all agree, like a 5-year plus jump for entire in the digital transformation space. And banks were also working in this direction. The support or the requirement that came at that time from the customer set was phenomenal, or was a requirement actually. So your millennials or young generation were all already inclined to your digital banking solution. But what happened at that time was senior citizens, housewives, and very specific ultra HNI segment, which is always pampered by all the organizations across the industry, who have 5-3 people working for them on the to take care of their banking transactions. RMs always take care of that. that segment also at that moment started asking for digital solutions and started collaborating or understanding what these digital solutions are all about. So that jump was never happened, and it might have taken 5, 7, 8 years, 10 years, but this happened at this time. Of course, the bank and the entire technology and everything came into picture and helped into the cost. What also helped was people who were already adopted. The best part happened was 5-20%, 25% people who were already young and millennials were already well versed in the tech space. They helped not just in banking but multiple other things to the housewives or the senior citizens or the ultra HNIs to learn faster and equip themselves faster. And that specifically created the entire thing, because once you have the customer, you have actually some technologies already there, and that entire cycle comes up. And of course, as Prasanna described, the collaboration between the different teams worked out, with the customer working, helping you, branches working, helping you, sales helping you. This entire cycle accelerated very fast at that moment, because it's all about input, output, and the feedback. So that was revolving very fast at that specific time period. So yeah, different time, different era is already highlighted, but interesting and a very fast track acceleration in this space.
Thanks, Umang. So, yeah, as you mentioned, there was like a huge acceleration because of pandemic. I mean, it was always there. Banking was always like one step ahead in the digital transformation space. But what do you think? When it comes to the infrastructure standpoint, how did pandemic actually changed it completely? Especially as you mentioned, as Umang had mentioned earlier, the customer expectation was changing completely. So when the customer is actually coming, they are actually comparing the products of sales or services. Maybe when they are using banking app, they're always comparing the banking app to an e-commerce app, or where we are not just competing with your sector, but also 10 different sector. So the question here is obviously there is going to be a changing world when the entire approach is actually going to become a customer centric. So from an infrastructure channel standpoint, as well as in a communication channel, how difficult was it to shift from an old conventional way to all these new communication channel? So Sumit, if you can actually give your ideas on that, it would be great. Sumit, you're on mute.
Yeah, sorry. So sure. So I must say that at certain point of time, I was actually reading about a survey a few days back. The digital transactions actually in 2018 to 2020 actually increased by 60% in India. Post pandemic, it actually must have increased more. This study is of almost 2 years back, before pandemic. This gives us the idea that the customers are actually moving towards digitalization. At the same point, once the customers are moving towards digital, the infrastructure has to improve immediately at organizations level, because the most important thing is that once the customer gets into digitalization completely, or a little bit also, the customer will start having a lot of queries coming in related to claims. If I talk about insurance claims, inquiries about new products, inquiries about riders, and additional add-on kind of things, wherein the infrastructure has to be really good. The queries have to be resolved immediately, because as I already said, the customer is agile, and if we are not able to give them a solution immediately, because face-to-face interaction is very low now, and on a table you can give a lot of options to the customers. You can talk much more about the products and services which you have. But in such kind of interactions where the communication has changed to digital, it becomes difficult to hold the customer back. So the query resolution management, this is one of the most important things that has to be taken care of. So infrastructure related to customer queries has to be really strong. And moreover, I think that redressal management is one of the most important, grievance redressal is one of the most important things that has to be taken care through digital platform. These are the two things which I feel is more important. The infrastructure has to be built more on these two platforms.
Thanks, Sumit. So yeah, I mean, moving on to our next question, we were talking about, communication strategy or channel strategy. Mostly, these were for a tech-savvy urban population, one part. So what has been your strategy, especially with the rural semi-urban population, where obviously smartphone penetration is still there, but still a large amount of population, are not using a smartphone, especially in the rural areas. So what was your strategy to communicate with those, those population? So Anish, maybe you can start.
Oh, so I think it's a myth that the non-urban populations are not digitalizing. Let me clarify that first of all. If you look at few metrics, if you look at UPI data, if you look at e-commerce data, and if you look at some of the new age startups that are coming in, I think there's a lot of demand which is there from tier 3, tier 4 towns, and even for some of the urban areas. I think the village infrastructure, if you talk purely core rural, yes, it's still some way to go. That's mostly because of broadband penetration and also lack of smartphone penetration. But recently UPI has come up with, for example, the SSD method of payment. So I think the transformation and the uptake of digital is there across the spectrum. In fact, since they started on a lower base and with a larger disposable income, I think what the pandemic has also done is that it has created a lot of disposable income which is not invested. And that is why consumption demand is increasing, and it has really thrown everybody the challenge that the moment the lockdowns get over, the demand kind of picks up. It's because people have surplus incomes to invest largely. So therefore, what really happens is that in the communication side, there are two things that we have observed during the pandemic. I think the spread of COVID thankfully has not been as bad in some of the rural pockets, primarily because of the distancing being naturally big. So the physical distancing has taken care of itself naturally because of the lower population densities. Having said that, I think the lockdowns therefore have been much more stringent in the urban centers. In the non-urban centers, and especially in the villages and rural areas, I think the BC model and the various other things that are there, the branches have continued. However, I don't think we are going back to the same way of physical infrastructure. As I said, there's a lot of digital demand that's coming in, and the communication, I think some of the, you have to look at it as a platform. I think banking is evolving from a traditional brick and mortar approach where there is a branch at the center of the community and everybody visits the branch. It's moving to banking as a platform. And now when you talk about a platform, you have to look at it you can look at it from multiple dimensions, but the way I see it is it's all about products and service. So if you look at from a service angle, I think a lot of the speakers mentioned in the previously that many things have become automated. Now, of course, the uptake will differ. So one of the things that I'm noticing a lot is the uptake of vernacular languages or local languages, because there are a lot of interfaces that people are preferring in Hindi or the local languages. There are already some apps which are offering up to 18, 20 languages. Even among the banks, if you see, many apps have started creating their own version. So that is one area, and it will take its time because there are regulations, there are challenges of communication, legalities, etc. But I think that's one thing which is going to really drive consumption of digital services. Second thing, which I want to really clarify, is that it's a myth that people don't want to adopt digital. And the surveys that we have done and customers that are RMs, etc., we keep talking to. I think fundamentally, Indians were never taught how to use Facebook. Indians were never taught how to make UPI payments. People learned. We are entrepreneurial by DNA. We are smart enough to pick up things. And our solutions are also smart enough to be quite intuitive in nature. Complex products anyway never work. And digital apps, products, etc., which have been simple in nature, have always had a good uptake. And UPI is a classic example of that. But I think the fundamental thing that's going to remain is you will never become a completely digital interface. There are customer segments. There are some segments who always like the touch and feel, who always prefer a human interaction to happen. And then there is another spectrum of consumers, especially the millennials, who, or some of the even the retired professionals, who are happy to do some of the transactions digitally as long as they feel security is there, right? In fact, there's a very interesting survey conducted by Deloitte in APAC region where they talked about that the security requirements of user also varies, right? We have also come across where checking balances, etc., users do not want too much of authentication. But when it comes to transfer of money, that is where, they want multi-factor authentication. And I think this kind of customization is still yet to happen in the industry. It's still a journey to be covered. I think there are a lot of things to be done. But fundamentally, I don't think we should start using the word urban, rural, and so on when it comes to digital adoption. I think we have to look at customer cohorts as millennials, as mid-career professionals, as retired, as MSMEs, affluent. We have to look at those dynamics. As a business person, I have come to this conclusion that geography as a metric does not apply so much today in India. In fact, with digital technologies coming in, the whole concept of n equal to 1 is going to emerge at some point of time, where you do complete hyper-personalization. So you have to look at multiple niches, and those niches have to be defined by income cohorts and behavioral dynamics, and geography is not going to play a very critical role there. I think geography is just a function of how much development infrastructure is available out there more than consumer behavior. I think even our farmers, if you see the kind of apps they have started using for weather prediction, for selling it in the mandi, I think there's a lot of evolution that's already happened and that's underway. So I think we have to look at consumer as segments rather than as geographical partitions, is my view.
Thanks, Amish. Sumit, your views on that?
So I'll take it from Anish only. He's very correct in what he's saying. Even I believe that. There was a survey done by Internet and Mobile Association of India, which says that the rural population is using more internet rather than the urban population. So the internet usage is more in rural population. And moreover, he's correct in saying that we should not give rural or urban definitions through geography. It is correct, perfect, because in urban population also we have people like migrants who are not using internet and going to BC outlets or other outlets for money transfer and all those kinds of services. So it's very correct. There's no geographical definition about a customer, about a person. It's about the way a person can adopt a situation or or digital platform. It's not easy for some, and it's easier for some of the people, and it's not easy for many in India. We can say in India many people are not easily going to adopt this. But then what will help? How can we manage this situation? So in a situation like a banking correspondent channel, majorly in rural areas, one of the platforms which is going to stay there, because this is one platform which is assisting, which is on an assisted model, wherein the banking correspondents are using applications or portals, but serving the customers in an assisted way. So that is going to stay there, because obviously 100% of the customer base cannot be digitalized. But what will help is financial inclusion and literacy programs that should keep running in the areas wherever this is required, majorly in villages. And another important thing is that the most striking thing is that 54%, as per the financial inclusion index of RBI, 54% of the people are financially have bank accounts, but only 22 to 23% are using it. So organizations have to actually build on giving literacy to the customer and making the interface very easy for the customer. Very true what Anish said, that it is important also that at the same time, because as he said that customers are sometimes afraid of using such kind of platforms. So it is very important for the organizations to ensure that the platform are easier. At the same time, if there is any issue that the customer face, it has to be resolved immediately. Then only these digital platforms will be supportive to the customer, and they will come and use those platforms. My view on this is that the most important thing that has to be done again is to take care that these digital transactions, if probably get stuck or some issue arises, immediately has to be resolved.
Thanks, Samit. So obviously moving on, to my next question, it's actually, some of the information which Anish had shared, Umang have shared. Obviously, the digital transformation is there, and a lot of omni-channel platforms we are going to use, personalization need to be there. So obviously, when it comes to hyper personalization, it will raise concerns on data privacy and security, because you're going to collect a lot of details or data from your customers. It has been shared to your partners. So what has been your strategy around that so that the customer data is not breached? Umang, I'll start with you.
Thanks, Shiva. So I agree, because when it comes to data and too much of data that is being shared with the help of this digital technology, it comes along with a responsibility, and that we all should adhere to. What majorly is happening is most of the banks and organizations are using most of the times a third-party service provider who's helping with the data analysis or multiple other things, and that's where the bigger concerns happen. Even if you use cloud or etc., that concern still remains there. So most of the organizations in this domain are either going through a private cloud or self in-premise storage of the data, but the way it's expanding, it's not possible to continue with the in-prem data or infra on those lines. So they are actually going to a private or a hybrid cloud with all the security norms being safeguarded there. Plus, most of the organizations now need to give and have actually started giving comfort to the user that if you are okay, we will process your data, and this is being followed across the country. And later on, you are giving an option to revoke this access also, and that's where the key is. And you can give the comfort to the user that yeah, I'm storing or processing your data, but in a more secure way. And even if I have to give it to third party for processing or anything, etc., you can revoke that access. The bigger part that are now coming up with the account aggregator and multiple other services where you're partnering with third parties and sharing this data with a third party for further usage for the benefit of customer only. That also should happen with the consent, and the customer should always have an option to revoke that consent. That's where the entire multiple fintechs as well as new banks, etc., can come into the picture, because it will anyways help into the further transformation or growth in this segment. But yeah, that's more about you have to ensure the consent, ensure it's secure, but you will have to use cloud because the data is expanding too fast.
Thanks, Umang. So Anish, your view on this hyper-personalization, data privacy and security?
Well, I think it's a very, very big challenge that's there. And I think it's very pertinent because I think with the GDPR guidelines that will also come in, we'll have to figure out our own strategies. So I think there are 2-3 ways to look at the problem statement. First, what is hyper-personalization? I think everybody is talking hyper-personalization, but most of the hyper-personalizations that are happening are on 2 fronts, on the UI experiences and also on the kind of customized offers that you're giving to the client. Both of them do not require PII. So I think when we talk about dependency on vendors, third parties, etc., the question is, are you sharing PII, that is personally identifiable information, or are you just looking at a certain cohorts and then creating pixels, cookies, and various other things that you're collecting legitimately with consent, and then creating certain personas around it and offering stuff. So I think that's one demarcation that's very important. As long as you are not having a PII information, I think to a great extent, even if that data is shared or work, there is very, very little damage that you can do to any individual, number one. Number two, I think, again, hyper-personalization is a term that everybody is talking, but we have to understand that ultimately, what is the purpose of hyper-personalization? I think banking will have a tough challenge, or even financial services will have a tough challenge to reach the level of hyper-personalization what an e-commerce company can do, purely because of the regulatory mechanism, because we are custodians of people's money versus selling some soaps or apparel. Is a huge difference. The third and foremost question is, if you ask a customer, and I've been speaking to quite a few, do they really want hyper-personalization? Most of the hyper-personalizations are, what they actually want is, do not waste my time showing me offers and schema which is not relevant to me. Doesn't mean that you make it that degree of customizable and you decide for me. In fact, customers want a degree of control. They want to decide. I'll give a simple example. Push notifications. There are so many notifications that you can send to a customer today on a super app, a financial app, where, right from every transaction to balance, alerts, at least 40, 45 scenarios you can build easily on a simple app. Now, what do you mean by hyper personalization? I'll go to the extent of customer research and figure out what kind of notification the customer wants. That is technically the definition of hyper personalization. No, you will give an option to the customer of what all notification he or she wants and let him or her play around with that. Similarly, with the theme of the app, give them choices to choose, customize their widgets. That is what hyper personalization means. If you go to Garmin is, if somebody doesn't know, it's the second largest selling brand of fitness watches. They have created an ecosystem where every feature of the phone or of the watch you can customize. That is another way of looking at hyper personalization. So hyper personalization need not be driven by AI/ML. It need not be data hungry. It is about giving choices to customers which are relevant. And I think that is one of the best ways to look at product offerings that we do, and also the UI UX experiences. Now it comes to what products you bring to the table, right? Or solutions you bring to the table, be it ecosystem solutions, be it credit products, be it asset investment products, whatever you're offering, again, keep it relevant to your target group. You don't want to be offering equity or a wealth endowment plan to a 60-year-old. I was just talking to somebody who said he's 65 and he's received mail communications for equity investments and for wealth endowment plans of insurance. What are you doing? Now, those are the things which pisses off customers. They say, you are sending me such junk. You don't know me. So I think a lot can be done with whatever data is existing with us internally, right from the bureau to UPI data, or so many other things that today financial institutions hold. Even if I think we have not even done justice to 10% of the data. If you build a thorough 360-degree view and use the data that you have, you can do tremendous service to customers and create tremendous value for yourself and for the customer. I think these jargons will always be there, but I think instead of worrying about how we can play on the cutting edge of data security, let's get our basics right. I think next 3-4 years, if we do that well, I think we would have done a great job of creating more wealth for our customers and also helping financial inclusion.
Thanks, Anish. That was really insightful, especially with all these jargons. It was really a good discussion. So moving on, to the final, final question for today's discussion. How do you think, cloud communication system can help you to achieve your digital transformation, especially, in aiding with the process of customer life cycle? Sumit, please, can you just share your views on that?
So definitely it will help in data capturing first and analytics. Most important is analytics. We will be able to provide better solutions, customized solutions to the customers. That is I think is the most important thing that it will help in. Personal communications, obviously because face-to-face communications are going to have already gone lower. Such kind of data will also help us to understand each and every life stage of the customer, and we will be able to provide better solutions, better products, and better services to the customers. This is what I feel this will help us.
Thanks, Sumit. Ekta, actually, today's discussion is we've completed today's discussion. Probably you can open open for panel discussion. Sorry, for questions.
Do we have any questions for our speakers? Please feel free to raise your hand, unmute yourself, and ask the question. Or you can also write the question in the chat box if you like. Okay, no problem. No questions. That's completely okay. On this closing note, I would like to thank our partner Exotel and all our thought leaders for taking time and being here. We really appreciate your presence. Also, thank you to our lovely audience. We appreciate your participation as well. I hope you had a great session. We shall be updating the video link on our website shortly. Kindly follow us on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter for webinar and event updates. All of you all, please have a great evening. Take care and stay safe. Bye, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, all of you. Thank you, Shubha.